In this presentation, we're going to add expenses using bank feeds. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We're going to first open our reports. Go into the reports on the left-hand side. We're going to be opening up the balance sheet, that being our favorite report. And we'll change the dates up top, change the dates from January, and let's go all the way out to December just to pick up everything. And I'm just more used to entering 12/31/20. Run that report. Then I'll right-click on the tab up top and duplicate that tab. Then we're going to go back to the tab to the left and go back to the reports on the bottom left, open up the other report that we typically open up, and that will be the P&L, the profit and loss, the income statement. We're going to scroll back up top, same date range. We're going to be ending this off at 12/31/20. Then I'm going to go ahead and run that report. Then we'll go and right-click on the tab up top. We're going to duplicate the tab up top. Back to the tab to the left then. Now we're going to be opening up our banking. We have just uploaded the bank data for April. So we're going to say, okay, here's the data for April. And this would be similar to if you had a connection to the bank where it would just be updating automatically. And we're going to go through here and say, all right, here's our data. We're going to now allocate it. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, look, it recognized a couple. And the more you do this, the more you get used to this. And if you had a lot of transactions, it'll recognize a lot of them. And this will really start to save you time. So anything that's a normal kind of transaction, such as these two, let's go to those two. Edison and the bank charges are going to utilities and the bank charges. That's pretty straightforward. Those two, I mean, if you have the phone bill, utility bill, blah, blah, those types of normal kind of things, you could set up the automatic kind of upload and that works great. So you can, after the first month, once you have it set up, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So you could add them from the recognize field, or if you scroll through here, you're going to find those green ones. And you could simply say, all right, there's Edison. It's going to the utilities. That's exactly where it should go. And then just simply add it. And you could do it with a bulk add too. You could select, this, and you could have selected the other one. This one's going to the bank charges. So we can add it over here. Or if there's a lot of them, we can check them off, go up top and say, I would like to accept selected. So I'm going to say accept, and there we have that transaction added. Then if we were to go take a look at those two, we go back to the balance sheet. We're going to open up the checking account so you can see the detail within the checking account. Scrolling all the way down, we should then find there's April and April. There's Edison. There's the bank draws. They're in there as expense type of forms, and here they are with the amounts. Clicking on either of those, if I click on this one, we will go to the form related to it, not back to the bank feed section, but the expense form, that being the form used to decrease cash when it's not a check, to decrease cash like a check without the check number, and record the other side, in this case, to the utilities. It's closing this back up. If we then go back, well, let's close it up here. I'm going to close it up here, and then I'm going to scroll back up, and then we're going to go back. I'm trying to go too fast here. And then if we go to the P&L, close up the hamburger, I could hold down Control and scroll up a bit. You may want to refresh the screen, because I only work with the fresh screens here, so I can see the current and latest, and yes, the greatest data. And then scroll back down, we'll have our data, and we added the bank charges. And let's actually see it just for April so we can see just the current data. Let's go 04/01/20 to 04/30/20 and run that, and we'll just look at the balance sheet for the current information, and there we have it. So bank charges, utilities, that's all we have for April at this point. Going back then to our bank, let's just kind of review and see if we can pick off the low-hanging fruit, which is typically the expenses. So if we're going to go through here, I'm going to say this is a deposit. I'll do those later. This is going to be a safe insurance. That's going to be the insurance company. Now, we paid for a year's worth of insurance, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit differently. We might just record that as an insurance expense. We will for a cash basis purpose, but I will get back to that and discuss that individually. Staples, that's typically going to office supplies. So that's going to be an office supply store office supplies store. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add staples. Let's go into this and say, all right, I'm going to add the name, and we could just basically copy the name up here. And I'm going to add that as a vendor if I don't have the vendor. So I'm going to add it as the vendor. So Staples, and you'd think I'd have it already if I look through here and type in Staples. There it is. So I'm going to add that. or just select it. And if you don't have it, obviously, then you would simply add it as well as a vendor. And then the category, I'm going to say it's going to go to, I would think, office supplies or something like that. The account given to us by the QuickBooks is office supplies and software. That looks good. That's already a GL account that's set up in QuickBooks. As you do this, remember, your goal is to kind of think, does QuickBooks already have an account that's appropriate before you add a new one? And if it doesn't, then add a new one. Use best practices. And if it has one that's close, but you don't like the name, like you'd like to name it a little bit different, then I would use the account, then go back to the chart of accounts and adjust the name to what you would prefer it to be. So I'm going to add that one. I'm going to say that looks good. So let's go ahead and add that. I'm going to apply all the future ones. They're going to recognize Staples and go to office supplies. That's generally good, although Staples is a pretty broad store. We might buy like equipment there at some time, furniture and fixtures. However, office supplies is a fairly safe bet for it. So I'm going to say that looks good. Let's go ahead and add that. Then I'm going to keep on going through here looking for the low-hanging fruit. We see Verizon, phone company. That's pretty straightforward. That's basically as straightforward as it can get. I just want that to go to the telephone expense. Again, if you don't have a vendor down here that it has selected already, you can just copy the vendor and add it. Typically, the description will include at least part of the section, including the vendor. You can add that down here. We're looking for telephone expense. So now QuickBooks sometimes doesn't add telephone. I guess they expect you to put it into utilities. So you may actually have to add the account for telephone if they don't give you one, because I would typically want to break out the two unless you just want to put it into utilities, and that's fine as well. Just depends how much detail you want. I have broken out the telephone expense in future presentations. So, when we did this in February, so there's the telephone expense. Again, it's going to try to read that in the future. So it's going to be one of those automatic things that it will see in the future. And that's fine. Verizon's one of that's pretty straightforward, so I would think that's okay. So it's gonna help us out and see that in the future, make it green, make it an automatic transaction. Then we have the Adam Smith. Now I know that's going to be like our employee expense, and Erica. Those are our two employees. I'll discuss them a little bit in more detail later. So we'll do that at a later time. So I'm gonna skip that. These are received payments. We're not gonna do that. This is gonna be Chase. I know that's gonna be my loan. That's who I pay for the loan company. I take out a loan. And also note, as we go through this, if you hit this little cog down here, I'm going to show the bank detail as opposed to just showing what QuickBooks guesses it to be. And if I show the bank detail, then QuickBooks isn't making assumptions about the detail column. It's coming straight from the data. For example, here I have no description. In those areas where I didn't include a description, there was nothing there, instead of it guessing and writing check. So just note that if you don't have that check, your screen might look a little different. And then I'm going to go down and say, so Chase, those are loan amounts. I'll deal with that later because those are loan payments. Vendor, that's going to be a new vendor for us. So you'll recall that we purchase and sell guitars. So that's going to be a new vendor that we buy guitars from. Now, last time we simply expensed the guitars and cost of goods sold. This time we're going to do it a little bit different. We'll put it into inventory. So we'll talk more about that later. So that's who we buy guitars from. This is another Chase. That's going to be a loan payment. We'll deal with that later. Easy window repairs, so that we had to repair our windows apparently. And that looks like it's pretty straightforward type of expense. So I think I can apply that one out. So that's going to be something like, I don't know, repairs and maintenance. So this is a new thing for us, but we could probably find a category in QuickBooks for it. So I'd look for it. If I didn't do it last month, I'd say, is there an account that QuickBooks has that would meet this qualification that they gave to us in the chart of accounts? And I'm going to say repairs and maintenance looks pretty straightforward. Easy window repairs. It's gonna save that as the setting. I'm going to say that's good. Anytime I pay window repairs, you would think it would be repairs and maintenance. So I'm going to say, okay, add that. And once I do that, then it sees this other one right underneath it and says, hey, I recognize that one now because you just did one right above it. And we're going to say, yeah, that's the same thing. You did a good job. You recognize it. It also shows up in the recognize area here. You can add it on this side, or you can add it over here. I can go to this one. It recognizes it here. If these are all good, you could batch act all these. When you first go into it, you see a bunch of them in here. You can review them. You can click off all of them and then do a batch, an add, and accept all of them at the same time. Now we have the suggested rules. It says, is easy window repair always repairs and maintenance? Check the following info for this transaction. then create a rule to auto-categorize it in the future. You can also choose to auto-add it to save time reviewing transactions. So we could basically set the rule up so it'll add it for us and we don't have to go through this review process. Instead, it'll add it automatically and we don't even have to go through this kind of checking it off and reviewing it for it. A lot of these I kind of like checking off unless it's really straightforward like the telephone bill, and possibly this one is pretty straightforward as well. But I'm going to close this one for now. I'm going to go back and we'll talk a little bit more about rules in a future presentation. Going to go back to the all area, and then we have scrolling down, we did Fender. We have Adam Hamilton. That's going to be a payroll item. So again, that's another payroll item. And then we have the draws. So we've picked up all the, straightforward, really straightforward type of expenses at this point. So let's go back to the balance sheet. Let's open up the balance sheet. As we do so, it will refresh it at the same point in time. Scroll back down to the bottom, and we're looking for everything that happened in April. So we now have the Staples, Verizon, Easy Window Repairs, those 2 checks, then Edison and the bank draws. Those are all in expense type forms. Those are all pretty straightforward. Those are all things that QuickBooks can pretty much help us with and make the transactions really easy. They come from the bank. We just write them off. Note that when we're talking about the expense side of things, the paying side of things, many small businesses are very content to be on a cash basis system. It's usually like the inventory that kind of messes that up. So if you don't have inventory, then typically a lot of small businesses would be fine on the vendor side of things, the pay side of things, the expense side of things. Oftentimes it'd be kind of on like a cash basis system. And then if we go to the P&L, I'm going to refresh. I'm going to click on the URL up top, hit enter because I like looking at the fresh reports. That's much fresher. And I'm going to close up the hamburger over here, and then we have our information. So we have the bank charges. This is just for April now. And then we have the office supplies. We got the repairs. We got the telephone and the utilities. Obviously, we're at a loss right now. We haven't entered any of the deposits, which would be on the other side, typically income.